Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Donald Trump yesterday morning released a statement about his policy regarding abortion after the Dobbs decision ended the 49-year regime of Roe v. Wade, and said things that were not entirely conducive to the claim that he is a pro-life politician, saying that he did not want the federal government to enact a national law on abortion, but that this should all be left to the states. We can talk about what that means and what it means in terms of the evolution of opinion on abortion and all of that, but I'm a little more interested in the what happened after, when Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina issued a "respectfully, I disagree with Donald Trump. We need a national law" tweet. And then Trump dropped a thermonuclear bomb on Lindsey Graham's head and said, he's only senator because of me. I let him win. He's an idiot. And I thought this was striking because it indicates that Trump's strategy from 2015 onward with Republicans has not changed a whit. That what he is going to do is enforce a basically mob boss atmosphere in which say anything he doesn't like. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done or how loyal you've been. One false move and he's going to set Luca Brasi on you. And Matt, what do you think that I'm right that what's interesting is the Lindsey Graham interaction, or do you think that Trump on abortion is interesting in and of itself?
I wouldn't be surprised if the two of them are playing golf together in 10 days. I think it's just meaningless what Trump said to Lindsey Graham, and he has to do it. It's a psychological tick that if you are vocal in disagreement in the way that Lindsey Graham was, he will just respond. But it's all meaningless and nothing matters because it's Trump. So I'll cabin that off, that little exchange there.
Okay.
And Lindsey's relationship with Trump, and talk a little bit about this statement, because I thought it was fascinating. We mentioned it on yesterday's program, but of course, as industry secret, I had not actually watched the statement when I commented on it yesterday. So afterward, I did watch all 4.5 minutes of it. And here's what struck me. This was not a statement about abortion. It was a statement about IVF. Most of the top of the statement, Trump's most passionate words were in support of IVF and ways in which to start a family for couples who are having trouble. Then it segued into the political problem posed by the overturning of Roe v. Wade for Republicans, and he landed on the position where he will simply support the state laws that are being passed for and against to varying degrees of restricting or allowing. And what that said to me was the Republicans have a massive problem on the IVF matter, and not necessarily the nuances of the abortion debate. There's a problem with abortion restrictions and with the party being viewed or cast as a radical party that wants to outlaw all abortions. But the bigger problem, I think, for Trump is the sense that not only was the Republican Party adopting that pro-life position or anti-abortion position, it was beginning to go after things like in vitro fertilization, which are, hugely popular, and I think rightly so.
Can I maybe make an analogy to help our listeners understand maybe where Trump and Trump's uh, remarkably sophisticated for Trump campaign team are looking and trying to shore up vulnerabilities and answer problems before they erupt for months. In that Dobbs overturned Roe. The overturning of Roe was the overturning of the idea that there is a constitutional right to abortion. That's it. There was no programmatic. Supreme Court answers questions. That's what it does. It does not really adjudicate cases. It answers constitutional questions. And it answered this question in the negative. There is no constitutional right to abortion. So let's analogize this to gun control. Abortion issue for the Democratic Party, passionate. Guns, passionate issue for the Republican Party. In each case, there are both entirely logical and philosophically consistent arguments to say, if you support the idea that the Second Amendment allows you to keep and bear arms, then you could basically, in theory, have a nuclear weapon. There was also, if you were a supporter of gun control, there is no barrier to going in the most extreme direction in the other direction, which is no one should have guns. Guns should be confiscated. There should be buybacks. You could take the position that Beto O'Rourke took when he was running for president, that all guns should be taken away, or guns should be taken away from people. And then rational political minds say, hold up there a minute, buddy. Like 33% of American households have guns. This is a voting issue for a whole lot of people. Don't go there. You're going extremist on something that matters to a lot of people. I think something very similar has gone on in the last year or 2 years, I guess, since Dobbs. Is it a year or two?
May 2020, June 2022.
Right, okay,
24th, 2022.
It's almost 2 years. Yeah. Which is that the IVF thing, which is a weird case, this Alabama, I don't want to go through the details, but it's a weird case involving the physical mishandling of embryos at a clinic. But it is true that the logic of some very passionate pro-life people says life begins at conception, therefore any conceived ovum has to be treated as though it is a living person. But so many people don't believe that. And so many people don't believe that abortion stops a beating heart, or that, a 6-week abortion is the same as a partial birth abortion or something like that, that the people who are following the logic to the logical endpoint are handing the people who are advocates for gun ownership or abortion an enormous weapon to use against more moderate positions. And Trump had a choice here, which was to say, I am with you pro-lifers to the last, mile. I'm going, you're right, abortion is murder. In vitro fertilization is, a morally problematic matter because it involves gestating a life that is then sort of held in abeyance in some kind of weird prison in a fridge. And he could have gone there. And they very clearly believe that going there would be suicide, just as I think Beto O'Rourke's position, or the most extreme gun position, is an act of political suicide for most people who adopt it outside of 9 ultra blue areas.
That might be it's certainly giving Trump campaign advisors a lot of credit, which they might deserve. But I think if you look at the history of Trump's statements on abortion, and I don't want to give him a ton of credit on this, but he's actually expressed over the years the kind of ambivalence that the vast middle of America also expresses. He's actually much more like the average American on this issue. You know, he had said he was pro-choice. He said, I don't like abortion, but I like choice. Then he said he was pro-life when he was talking to a conservative media outlet. Then in 2016, he said, oh, women who get abortions should be punished. But here's the thing, politically right now, yes, you're correct, absolutely correct. He is in a really tight spot in terms of this issue, and they know it. It's going to be it's been a huge issue in midterm elections. But what Joe Biden did in response to that 4.5-minute ad was really interesting to me, because they have become much less nuanced, and the extremists in their own coalition, extremists who think you should be able to have abortion on demand all the way through pregnancy with no restrictions, which actually has been driving their coalition for the last few years. That's not being discussed at all, because the ad he came out with, a 60-second spot, said it featured a woman who had trouble getting abortion, and it talked about talked about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and it just said one thing: Donald Trump did this, and that is a very powerful message.
And it has a weird valence, because on the one hand, Trump in his statement takes credit rightly for nominating the justices who did overturn Roe v. Wade. And on the other, with his new position of essentially saying it's up to the states, you can attack him for at least tacitly supporting things like the 6-week restriction in Florida, things like the heartbeat bill in Texas. I think the weakness of the position he's adopted is it doesn't give him anything to be for. Right. The choice he faced and his campaign faced wasn't between adopting the, Professor Robbie George position on abortion and the Democratic platform on abortion. The choice he faced was he going to adopt Lindsey Graham's proposal of a 15-week restriction with Trump exceptions? So Trump has always said he supports exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. Or was he going to try to say, look, it's up to the states, and whatever the states decide, that's the will of the people there? Well, he chose the latter, and I think that is going to cause him some regret down the road, because as I was watching the Republican response to the Biden attack, Christine, I kept thinking of that famous moment after the debate between Bob Dole and George H.W. Bush, where Bob Dole was so angry that he stormed off the stage and said, "Stop lying about my record."
Oh, that's right.
And that's going to be where Trump ends up, because he has now exposed himself to the Democrats, saying he's for the furthest possible restrictions on abortion because he's letting it up to the states. He thought that this is a way for him to avoid making a declarative statement on abortion, but I think he could come to regret it. And that's why I also think this is not the last word that we will hear from Trump on the abortion issue.
See, I think Trump's position here itself is not weak, particularly. In fact, I think it's, given the sort of tightrope that he may have to walk on this, I think it's perhaps wise. I think the weakness of it is that he can't talk about it in a way that can sort of sell it. Trump is great at talking about simple issues. That's like, no one does that better in terms of making explosive sound bites that capture some sort of essence. Complex, really difficult, complex issues, balancing the moral, the legal, and democratic opinion. This is something that is so out of his wheelhouse that he ends up kind of bumpering and sounding like when he said that women should be punished. He sort of walked right into that. Someone asked him, "So do you think there should be some punishment for?" Yes, there should be some punishment for women who have abortions. I mean, he can't maneuver in those waters.
Well, can we game this out then? What should Trump, if you're looking at the politics of the present moment? So he defaulted to a kind of wonky conservative position.
Yeah, it's a federalist position, right? It's like let the states decide.
It is literally what the overturning of Roe v. Wade as a legal matter simply does. Overturn Roe v. Wade, we revert to the condition that America was in before Roe v. Wade, and states are free to regulate abortion based on their own political makeup. So, Matt, you as I think the first, want to say that on the day that Dobbs came down, the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade came down, you said Republicans are walking into a whole mess of trouble. This is a new political reality we're in. It's been 49 years with Roe. All of Republican politics has, in a weird sense, depended on the existence of Roe. Not all, but this politics has depended upon the existence of Roe as something you can push back on in 100,000 different ways because Roe was there blocking any effort, not any effort, but most efforts to regulate or ban abortion. And suddenly it was gone. And now they were going to have to take responsibility for actual policies regulating abortion.
Right.
So as that is, if you were a Trump person, you're saying, I don't know, this was not, maybe he's got stuff he's got to do. What, if you were in the room, would you have told him to do yesterday?
Oh, I would have told him to support the 15-week limit with exceptions.
Okay, now why is that?
Because it's something to be for, and I think that it's not as politically dangerous as some of Trump's other advisors convinced him of. Glenn Youngkin, for example, embraced the 15-week limit in the off-year elections in order to get the state house under Republican control. While it's true that he failed to do that, it was not a killer. I mean, it did not sink. It was not like a huge Democratic landslide in Virginia when Youngkin campaigned on this, and it had the virtue of being a substantive position that you could, when attacked and being called an extremist, you could say, no, this is my position. Trump can't do that. Moreover, the statement left a lot of questions lingering. What about the Hyde Amendment? The Hyde Amendment is not left to the states. The Hyde Amendment, which bans taxpayer funding for abortion, is a federal law. What about this
funding for abortion, not only in the states, but in supporting international organizations?
Right, the Mexico City policy.
The Mexico City policy that might themselves conduct abortions.
What about the partial birth abortion ban? Right, that's federal legislation. What about the abortion tourism that the Pentagon is promoting? Where will Trump be on that? Now, I have a suspicion that Trump will side with the pro-life community on all of those issues if he's president. But he should. This is unlike Trump in trying to dodge, right? If Trump's whole political MO is, I'm going to tell it to you like it is, or I'm going to tell Chris Matthews in 2016, yeah, the women should be punished for having the abortion and win the election. I think this statement was something of a hedge, and that's why so many pro-lifers were disappointed. Now, there's another interesting aspect to this, which is if this were in a primary, a Republican primary, and a candidate came out with this position and left all of these unresolved issues on the table, the pro-life groups would not endorse the candidate. And while the pro-life groups said that they were very disappointed and disagreed with Donald Trump's statement yesterday, they have not backed away from him. They're still part of the Republican Party. They're still supporting the Republican nominee. And so one thing I have argued for some time is that Trump may be the president who ends the GOP's alliance or with the pro-life community for good. And that is I think there might be some political upside maybe down the road, but I think morally it's not a good part of his legacy.
Well, and the pro-life community actually sounded to me in their response to Trump's statement like the really radically pro-choice groups sounded to me when they were trying to explain away Biden's remarks about how, well, I'm a Catholic, so I'm very ambivalent about this. I mean, they actually, on their side, want a champion who's like abortion all the time, anytime, taxpayer funded. It's healthcare. Abortion is healthcare. And Biden doesn't say that. He still clings to these sort of whatever tiny shreds of Catholicism he claims to believe. And I'm sure he believes it himself, but his position is incredibly inconsistent, as we've discussed. But that's actually something where they were very nuanced. Some of the Concerned Women for America, some of the other groups were like, well, we know the political realities, and so we just have to accept. I'm like, who are you? Like, this is Matt's right. It's a very different shift. But I really think he could have added in that statement, as Matt notes, bringing especially taxpayer funding on abortion. This is not a popular idea, even among people who are sort of mildly pro-choice. They don't want to pay for other people's abortions. So that is something he could have brought back to the Democrat, sort of attacked on the other side, and he didn't.
So, I mean, I think it's important that, Matt, you focused on the fact that the statement is, 2/3 about IVF and 1/3 about abortion, because that indicates, and it's an indication of what Dobbs has wrought, that views that are so far outside of the mainstream, but are tempting to people who view abortion as the single most important moral question facing the country, and ever facing the country, and have thought very deeply about it, and see, I think, properly, if you're thinking about this as a philosophical matter, that there is a problem with IVF, that there is a moral problem with IVF. But how many people in this country go through IVF? And what is IVF about but the hunger to give birth? Just go back to the Bible. The Bible, the Torah, is an endless series of stories about women who have difficulty conceiving. This is a sort of a thing that is at the root of human nature. The story of Abraham is a story of a barren couple. And the beginning of the Jewish people begins with a divine intercession and a miracle that allows for the birth of Isaac. I only bring that up not to, sort of like Judify this conversation, but to say that at the very beginning of Western civilization, the problem of people who have difficulty conceiving is at the heart of how we think about these things. And so, they wanted to try to nip this very specific thing in the bud, because it is one of those moments where you go, look, I understand that abortion is a moral problem and partial birth abortion is disgusting. And once you hear a heartbeat, I don't know. And, have you seen these 3D ultrasounds? Like, that's a baby in there and you can't just kill it. To the intercession to try to help people who have difficulty having babies.
But that's accepting the framing that the very radical pro-choice Democrats want everyone to accept, and that's misguided. And I think the fact that he talked about that was an attempt to separate these two. Look, the fertility industry in this country is basically unregulated, and that's been a problem for decades. So whatever you think of the usefulness of IVF, there are still a lot of cases, and the Alabama case was one, where the mishandling of embryos leads to all kinds of problems for people and terrible results. But until Roe v. Wade was overturned, everything about fertility got dumped into either you're pro-life or you're pro-choice, and you can't discuss anything in between. There's now this opening for discussing, and these are very difficult moral and legal questions. Are embryos property? Should we treat them like property? Are they a human life? I mean, they're fascinating questions with deep constitutional implications as well. So, and again, like to the point, like as Abe said, this is not something you want Donald Trump parsing.
Who better to answer those moral questions?
But there is this inability on either side to even for anyone to point out that that's a separate issue. It's just collapse it into the old ways we know of talking about this and start screaming at each other.
What the Roe regime allowed, in a remarkable way, if you think about it, because it was this firewall that said, sorry, you can't ban abortion. Constitution, permits abortion, was a series of extraordinarily nuanced positions, both on the right and the left, to try to deal with what to do about this wall if you have moral problems with this wall. So in 92, when the Casey decision, which was the first serious effort to overturn Roe, failed to do so, the pro-life movement, which had basically been no abortions, never, nothing, had to shift gears, because if its purpose was to reduce the number of abortions, it then had to take different strategies. So it did, and so it moved on to third trimester things. Was there a way to regulate that? Was there a way to regulate partial birth and so on? And then Bill Clinton brilliantly came up with this thing to comfort people who kind of supported abortion but were queasy, but found it a subject they couldn't bear, right? Which is, he said, abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Genius. This was a genius political position, because it said he supported the existence of abortion. He believed it was a healthcare issue because it should be safe, but we should have as few of them as possible in an ideal world. So the rare part, of course, the Democratic Party has now jettisoned entirely. Not only should it not be rare, it's healthcare. Therefore, it should be applied as much as possible somehow. And
they now talk about it like it's the same thing as contraception, which unfortunately is not what you want. Women using abortion should not be treated as if it's contraception.
Well, that's what you say.
Right. But it's healthcare. No,
let me mansplain to you why that's wrong. I just think that it was 50. Roe was the law of the land for 50 years, and it's now been less than 2. And the country is in a kind of slow motion uproar about this, as state by state do things, and then other states reject them. And now we have one party that is going to want to put this at the center of the 2024 presidential election, and one guy who really doesn't want it at the center of the 2024 election at all. Because in 2004, it was helpful to Republicans to have abortion as a major, if not the major, domestic issue, along with gay marriage. And in 2024, it doesn't really appear to be helpful at all. But this statement in April, as I think Matt says, is not going to cut it, because so basically he's saying, I don't want to talk about this. And then Biden's going to say, yeah, what about Texas? What about Alabama? What about Florida? What about 6 weeks? What about you? Your entire party is passing legislation all over the country. Do you think they should? Do you think they shouldn't? Of course, they're not going to ever engage each other one-on-one. So all this will just be done in commercials. Now, let me ask you one final question, Abe. But then we can move on. Do the Democrats face the prospect that they are going to overreach with this and make abortion seem like it's a wonderful and good thing, rather than a necessary and heartbreaking alternative or something like that? Like, we're very close to the idea that abortion is like Caitlin Clark, in that it is just, everyone must celebrate it. It's a thing for women. It's great for everybody. It's very necessary. I don't know. Is that?
I mean,
I apologize to Caitlin Clark for what is really a terrible analogy. It's very early in the morning, and I don't know why I went there. I was trying to be relevant on a subject I actually pay very little attention to, which is women's basketball. So I apologize.
I don't know if the Democrats are going to do that per se. The activists are there. I mean, they've been doing that for a long time. I thought it was interesting. I thought I saw a statement from Kamala Harris saying that despite what Trump had said, if he were to be elected, he would support a national abortion law. Now, I think that's interesting because it shows me they really wanted him to, and he didn't. He didn't oblige. They wanted him to come down firmly. I think, as Matt says, he should have in some sense. They wanted him to take a position on a national law so that they could say that it would fit into the dictator, end of freedom, end of democracy framework. So that's why I say I think to the extent that he slipped through their grasp on that, it was okay for him. But as we've all been saying here, this is not an issue that dies after you make a comment, and he cannot further expound on his ideas about this, and it is going to come up whether or not he and Joe Biden come face to face, which they won't.
So let me play McLaughlin Group here as we end this discussion. So, who won the day on abortion yesterday, Biden or Trump?
Biden's been having some good days lately.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd say Biden.
He's winning right now.
Abe, I don't think you want to say Biden, but would you say Biden?
Oh no, I agree. Yeah, Biden.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so we all think that Biden won the day. All right. Biden did something else yesterday, which is beat the same horse that he's now been beating for 2 years, which is, hey, you want some more money for college loans? You want some more federal money paying off your college loans? Here. You get a college loan, and you get $5,000 in a college loan, and you get $5,000 in a college loan. I'm fascinated by how this is the one area they seem to have hit on for the how to buy votes in this election category.
This is their new base, John. Highly educated college graduates who are just, who took on too much debt and now want to transfer it to working and middle class people who didn't go to college and earn $250,000 a year as a family. It is, this gets me so irate. Like, it is debt transfer. It is not loan forgiveness. And given our national debt and the fact that neither party seems to wants to pretend that it's not continuing to climb at an astonishingly dangerous rate. This is just the most irresponsible thing he could possibly do, but it's absolutely targeting the Democratic Party's new base.
The process is also so completely corrupt.
Yeah.
You hear, Biden proposed this first student loan relief plan, and the Supreme Court recently found it unconstitutional correctly. And rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go to the Congress, I'm going to campaign in 2024 on federal legislation relieving the debtors of the burden, he went back to his pals in the administrative state and said, okay, let's come up with another way to make an end run around Congress and the voters in order to pay off this constituency. And so he goes to Wisconsin yesterday, a swing state, and he unveils this plan, which is essentially the original plan, except maybe a little bit more cleverly designed as to avoid litigation. Now, I happen to think that there will be litigation again, and most likely the court will find this latest version of student debt relief unconstitutional again. But as Christine is saying, that's not what this is about. This is about sending a message to his base, to young voters in particular, the recent college or professional school graduates, that he's there, he's fighting for them. And so you better come out and vote for Biden in November.
I keep reading these analyses of the electorate. Various very interesting speculative analyses of what the electorate will be composed, how it will be composed in November of 2024, which of course you cannot know. Like, people didn't know that there were all these voters for Trump that had never come out before in 2016. People didn't know that in the midst of the pandemic, there was going to be this astounding turnout in 2020 It seemed likely that turnout would be lower because of the difficulties in voting. When that didn't happen, so nobody knows what the electorate is like in a presidential year until after. But there are 2 or 3 different things that seem to be up for grabs. One is the youth vote. So we're told the youth vote went 2 for 1 essentially for Biden in 2020, or is, leaning very Democratic in a way that it hasn't in the 50 years since the voting age was lowered to 18. And on the other hand, there are these straggles of polls here and there suggesting that Trump is actually doing well among the youth vote, or at least that Biden is not doing as well as the last 5 elections would indicate he should be. So is he doing this because he looks at those numbers and say, I need those people, so I can't drop this issue. I'm going to hammer it until they get this in their head. And so I can get a huge turnout among precisely these people and therefore somehow overcome this difficulty that I'm facing with people who might vote for Trump, but who are probably, as they are less educated, less likely to vote. So maybe they'll vote in lower numbers. I can get some kind of astronomical turnout among, the college educated, and I can balance out that problem. So that's number one. Number two is all these people who are saying Biden needs to do a little bit better among working class and lower middle class voters who don't go to college, that his numbers, there are just too many of them. His numbers among them are too low. If he could just get them up some, he can change the dynamic that seems to have him, at risk in places. But he doesn't seem to be going there because there are things he could do for them. He thinks he has already. He's helpful to unions, though, of course, that's also actually a form of middle class and upper middle class support now, being a big union guy, which people don't really understand. But nonetheless, so I'm not sure I understand what it is that he's doing, because if that second category is he's really got to do something to get these voters who are either going to stay home or vote for Trump or something like that to look at him a little more favorably so he can just get more of them, not a majority of them, just get more of them to cut into this Trump lead among them. And I don't see any indication that they have any plan for that.
Well, I think politically, this plays very differently than what Christine and I are saying. As usual, Christine and I are in the minority position. Politically, I think most people see the coverage of this announcement yesterday in Wisconsin, and they say, okay, well, Biden's helping people. Here's the federal government trying to make good for somebody. And most voters who don't pay attention to politics, I don't think they have much problem with that. So I think this is a successful play for Biden, as much as I think that it's a terrible policy and as much as I really dislike the manner in which he's gone about it. I mean, at a kind of a roundtable discussion yesterday, one of the participants applauded Vice President Harris for finding a way around the Supreme Court. That's not, and then in the State of the Union, or as I like to say, one of the worst speeches ever, Biden rebuked the Supreme Court to their faces, saying, you guys are terrible. You're awful. I hate your decisions, to their faces. Why they even show up anymore, I don't understand. But so that type of kind of disregard for the Constitution is something that the Democrats spend 24 hours a day accusing Trump of having. And while I don't think Trump is the biggest supporter of the Constitution, he's certainly the same attack can be used against Biden on the basis of this policy and on the basis of his vaccine mandate from the beginnings of administration. The idea that somehow Joe Biden is the defender of the American Constitution is, to me, laughable.
This is also an example, though, of where if we had a functioning opposition party right now, if a Republican Party with Republican leaders could explain the other side of this, so that the average voter who doesn't have time or interest or any inclination to get into the weeds about the constitutional issues would say, "Oh, look, a response to Joe Biden's so great, he's relieving debt for people. That's so nice." You would need someone on the other side who could say, "Actually, what he's doing is transferring debt to people who can least afford it to give a payoff to his." I mean, nobody's really saying that.
No, instead we have Marjorie Taylor Greene accusing Ukraine of waging war on Christianity.
I don't know, but I also think, to John's point, you don't think that there are working class people out there who have debt that isn't college related,
medical debt in particular, yes.
And they look at this and they go, "Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So these people, these kids can go to class. What about me? What about my? Why is my debt less important?"
Yeah, I mean, my point is those people hate Brandon anyway.
Right, well, that's true. But you'd also have to. I think Christine's point is right. You'd have to put the issue in front of them in very stark terms. He isn't helping you. He's helping them.
Right.
And I think that there is a little bit of a hard sell there, right? Because he's helping somebody. So you're essentially having to acknowledge he's trying to give help to somebody, not that he's hurting, so you're sort of essentially.
But people do that. The way to phrase it isn't isn't to attack the help he's attempting to give, but to say these are the people who least need the help right now. Right. They earn more than the average American by, times 4. And they made a choice. It's not as if it's crushing medical debt or that they went into debt to get a truck so they could run a business. I mean, that's not what they did. So
you don't like the policy, but you think politically it's savvy. And I'm it's not that I don't think it's savvy. I'm just wondering at the fact that we now have proposal number 3, which seems to suggest that proposals number 1 and 2 didn't take because all he needs to do really is say,
you're right. Well,
this is the policy I want.
If he went to the Congress, it wouldn't have the support.
Right.
Because there would be a debate about it and people would surface the same arguments that we've been making on the podcast. I'm just saying that the political effect is, a wash to maybe slight help to Biden, because this is an example of him being an activist president as opposed to normally where he looks like he's barely alive.
Right. You had mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ukraine, and we have a very stark thing that just happened. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told a fundraising group via satellite call or Zoom or something. He said very starkly, if the U.S. aid does not come through, we will lose this war. It's 2 years and 2 months since the war started. This is the first time Zelensky has come to request aid, to needle, to demand, to sort of to try to put moral pressure down and all of this. He is now saying it's one or the other. We don't get this aid, we're dead. This is it. Russia will win the war in Ukraine. And then we're in a new world and a new reality. I don't know if this is a gambit. I don't know if he's like putting the screws to Speaker Mike Johnson, who has said that he wants Ukraine aid to pass, but is in this incredibly difficult, situation with his razor-thin majority.
He's still having discussions this week. He's not going to do anything about it this week, and he's having discussions.
So this is a very stark thing that is happening here. So this is a Republican bad behavior, Republicans irresponsible and leading America into a terrible position in terms of what it says to the world if it supports something outside our borders for the rest of the 21st century, how we are inconstant, we cannot be relied upon, we will run away at the nearest possible. That's the Republican Party telling that to the world. And the Democratic Party is now increasingly showing that to the world in relation to Israel. So
I just want to say on the Ukraine issue, it also gets Biden off the hook. I mean, Biden was too slow and gave too little for too long, but that to Ukraine, but that is now washed away. Could be washed away by the Republicans not wanting to give anything. That becomes a much bigger issue.
I think it's entirely washed away.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you say about Biden, he wants aid. He didn't give enough of it or the right aid when basically he had a blank check to do so, and he had the ability to export arms under U.S. law in the way that he thought was necessary during an emergency, and he didn't do it. And so, but still, he's still a supporter of the aid. It's the Republican Party, and not even a majority of the Republican Party which supports the aid, at least among elected officials. So it would be a rump minority in this very bizarre political situation the party finds itself in. So that's the Republican Party is saying, don't trust us. We are not, our word is worth nothing. And, and now we have the Democratic Party. So we have the number of House members, I think up to 56, who are now saying that they want weapons sales to be halted to Israel until we find out what the hell is going on. We have Elizabeth Warren going to a mosque in Boston last week and saying that she now believes that Israel has met the international law conditions for genocide. And, she should know because she is 1,028th a victim of genocide. So, we really have to trust her opinion on this matter. And Tim Kaine, who would have been vice president of the United States, but for Jim Comey and Anthony Weiner, has basically out and out called for the withholding of aid to Israel, thus defaulting to his going to picking coffee beans for communists in Nicaragua as a youth position. Because, he speaks Spanish, and that's because he wanted to go and basically be a communist simp. So America dodged a bullet there in the vice presidential history. Nancy Pelosi, of course, now supports this. All right, so Israel on Thursday, Biden said, "You stink. I'm so mad at you. Do something or we're going to change policy." So what did Israel do? It changed policy radically. Pulled all but one brigade out of Gaza. Opened a crossing at Erez. Opened a dock at Ashdod, near Ashdod for supplies. And is at the negotiating table in Egypt, apparently making very lavish offers. We don't really know what they are, but to try to appease America and to satisfy Biden's demand that policies change. Then there was there were these disturbing rumors all day yesterday about that Hamas had rejected the deal, that Hamas had said that it couldn't deal for 40 hostages in the humanitarian category, that's women and children and old people, because there weren't 40 hostages to trade for, meaning that they're dead. That has not been confirmed, but it has not been denied. We're not really sure what's going on there. So my question to you guys is, Biden said, do something or we're going to change policy. Israel then did exactly what Biden demanded from Thursday onward in a way that is unnerving people who support Israel's efforts here. Are they going to do anything to say, okay, you did what we said, we made these demands and you met these demands?
It doesn't look like it. It looks like the Biden administration wants the war over. And the counter to that would be the war can't be over until Hamas is defeated. And this dilemma has put Prime Minister Netanyahu in a weird position where, yesterday he also announced that the date has been set for the Israeli operation in Rafah, and we will finish the job. But I wonder if people are taking his claim seriously, because he's been saying similar things for weeks now, and nothing has
said
happened.
We're on the cusp of victory.
The verge of success.
We're on the verge of victory.
Right.
But here's what Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman, said yesterday. We've seen them take initial steps here over the past few days, but we want to see much more. We're going to be watching them. Always watching, like in Monsters, Inc., always watching over the coming days, the coming weeks, to see that the steps they have announced actually lead to improved results. And we will make assessments and make determinations of our policy based on those results. Now, that's Matt Miller. He's not making policy. He's simply reporting that the line of the Biden administration is, we are measuring our response now in terms of weeks, because we are trying to delay you from going into Rafah until such time as a negotiated ceasefire can take place that leaves Hamas obviously not intact. It's very wounded. It's, 12,000 fighters have been killed and all of that, but leaves Hamas to kill thousands of Israelis for another day. This is now implicit U.S. policy.
The administration has not zigzagged here. It's not like they've said they've gone in one direction, pros, and then they go back. Then they said pro-Israel. It's been a steady move from forcefully pro-Israel, steady, perhaps a little slow, to getting to where they are now, which is, you stink, this is bad, nothing you do is going to satisfy us. This is their position. They are now part of actively stirring up anti-Israel sentiment. And as I said a while ago, the longer that it took to go, for the pause was before Rafah, the worse this was going to get. And the Biden administration now is in a position where they are not going to be able, because if and when Bibi goes into Rafah, what Matthew Miller is going to see, what everyone's going to see, is war. And when they see that, it's all going to go crazy again. It's all going to, there is nothing that any Biden administration person is going to be able to say that's going to satisfy anyone on the left that they are trying to satisfy now with their anti-Israel shtick.
Our friend Aaron McLean noted on Twitter the other day that it's not enough for America in the 21st century not to win our wars. We also have to force our allies to lose their wars as well. And that's what makes me so disconsolate. I mean, the school marmish tone of Matthew Miller's statement is retch-inducing. Get off your high horse here. How about have metrics and watch how successful Israel is in defeating this terrorist organization that wants to kill every Jew on the planet, right? I mean, maybe that should be the metric in what you're watching for. I continue to think Israel's not going into Rafah anytime soon, and instead they're going to continue to try to appease the Americans by shifting to a low-intensity operation and intelligence aimed at finding the Hamas leadership somewhere in the tunnels. But my fear is that will only make things much more dangerous.
In Israel domestically, in the domestic politics of Israel, something important happened on Sunday. So, as you know, Bibi's coalition, the coalition that supports the existing government, which is a majority government, 64 seats, is ballasted by these two parties that came into that joined together, and therefore got an unexpectedly large number of seats. This was Bibi's design, led by two extremists, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. And Ben-Gvir came out on Sunday, and what they are thought of or known for is that they are They are focused on the West Bank. They are politicians who are focused on the settlers, attacks on the settlers, trying to make more settlements, running the police and and justice system in a way that will sort of immunize settlers from being attacked for trying to claim land and all of that. Ben-Gvir came out on Sunday and said, if you do not go into Rafah, we will pull out of the government. And that will be the end of this government. That's a very important moment, because that is not his political focus. And he is saying that this is the most important thing. That now means that there is pressure from Bibi from the right that he was counting on to sort of have his back, because their political future is not assured if this government falls. Those parties may split apart. They may not get into the next Knesset or even get enough votes to get seats in the next Knesset. But Ben-Gvir said, you go in or the government falls. Now, can you trust that when push comes to shove, that's going to happen? No. But it is an indication of how unified the people of Israel are on the necessity of winning this war and going into Rafah. And the question is, when Bibi and the war cabinet have had enough of America's efforts to delay, they cannot but go in. That is almost unthinkable. So maybe they'll try this low-intensity conflict game for a little bit while they figure some other stuff out. But they're going in.
Well, maybe it will be after the American election.
Well, you know what's funny about that is that would be really stupid of them, because the longer that this is a frozen conflict,
I completely agree.
Right, the more events
but you
WC
mentioned
Kitchen.
Ben-Gvir's threat. That explains Bibi's comment about, I have the date.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I won't tell you.
Yeah,
But I have the date. So they're all playing this game. And meanwhile, the hostages are still in captivity, and Hamas still exists.
I think it's notable. We should mention that today Kamala Harris is meeting with the families of hostages. I think Jake Sullivan's also going to be in that meeting. No press allowed, which I thought was interesting. No press. Yeah. Why? So even when they are doing the right thing, meeting with the hostage families, they don't want to publicize that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, we didn't parcel out the recommends. Does anybody have a recommend?
No, Abe volunteered his tribute.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Katniss Greenwald.
I feel bad. Abe, go ahead, please.
Very, very nice. We have broadened our recommend categories here recently. I think the most radical departure was when John recommended a tweet.
That might be seen as a low moment.
But it was a tweeted video. It was a tweet with a video. It was a tweet with a video.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
it was a race. It was a baby race.
Yes.
We're defining recommendations down.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if we've recommended a website before. I don't think so. But I'm certain we have not recommended an aggregator website before, which is where I'm going. Under usual conditions, meaning when Israel is not in an existential war, the website that I visit first thing when I open my computer every day, and I've done this for years, is realclearscience.com. The whole Real Clear universe, namely Real Clear Politics, Real Clear Investigations.
The RCU.
Yes, is a universe of aggregator websites that do an amazing job of clearly laying out articles and opinion pieces, video, of course, polls, and they also mix in some original content as well. Same goes for Real Clear Science. Real Clear Science is great because if you are like me, interested in all sorts of fascinating scientific discoveries and assertions, but you are not at all formally educated in advanced science, I wouldn't even know where to go to get the stuff to read every day, and they always have interesting, if not fascinating, pieces up there. And whoever is in charge of Real Clear Science, in particular, gets up very early, because if I wake up at 4:30 and I can't get back to sleep and I go check it, it's already populated for the morning. And they always have terrific things. For example, today, there is an article up from a site called Universe Today, which I wouldn't even know about. And it talks about a paper in which astrophysicist argues that, one possible solution to the Fermi paradox, which is why is with such a seemingly enormous probability of life elsewhere in the universe, why have we seen zero evidence of it? Well, so there's this argument, one resolution called the Great Filter, meaning some cataclysmic event sort of happens to every advanced society to make it so that it never gets as far as reaching another planet where there's civilization. This says, well, maybe the Great Filter is AI. Every advanced civilization out there gets to AI. AI becomes super AI, smarter than humans, takes over, and
We are
that's
animals
it.
in the zoo. Yes.
Yeah, and that's it.
That's a contemporary twist on the Great Filter
Exactly.
theory.
And that's it for
Look, wouldn't the
interplanetary
AI contact us, though?
Why?
We're
Why
nothing
bother?
to them. We're too-
Would you if you were super
Do you
intelligent?
talk to the animals in the zoo, Matt? Do you
Yeah.
ask how they really feel?
I hate to bring it up, but this is part of the plot of the three-body problem right there. This is a huge element. Why haven't we found civilizations elsewhere? It's that if we were to find them or they were to find us, they would kill us instantly. So the whole point of living in the universe is to hide. And that is the message of the three-body problem. So it's like, now we need to hide from AI, because that would be its
Well,
rational.
my answer is
Yes.
they haven't contacted us because they don't exist. But
Yes.
that's just me.
Yeah, I'm there too. But we don't need to go there. So
No, we
Real
don't.
Clear Science.
Yeah.
Of course, what's interesting about that and your recommendation is that articles like that and stuff indicate the sort of how, because of quantum mechanics and the science that is indistinguishable from magic, like AI, which is what Arthur C. Clarke said was true of advanced technology, that a lot of these explorations are in essence philosophical, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then they are speculative, and they sort of go to thought processes.
I saw an article, maybe it was on Real Clear Science, but I saw an article recently that said that the dark energy, which is energy we cannot detect, yet scientists somehow say is the cause of the universe's expansion, is slowing down. Leading me to ask, so if we can't measure it or see it, how do we know it's slowing down?
Kind of like middle age. Though.
This is a question.
You feel it.
Right.
This is a question we
By the
could
way-
ask the super intelligent AI.
That's
Okay,
right.
The final thing I want to bring up is a fascinating thing I read yesterday as the eclipse was upon us. People who have read Paul Johnson's Modern Times, the extraordinary history of the 20th century, know that it begins with the description of the experiment that Albert Einstein conducted, or the event that was used to determine that the theory of relativity was correct in 1919. And apparently that theory has rarely been tested under real world conditions since, with modern astronomical devices, and that it was decided that they would do this this time with this solar eclipse somewhere in Mexico, that they would try to have a final. No one doubts that the theory of relativity is correct, but no one has actually tested it in that way till now. And so that happened yesterday. So let's look for the article that says, oops, the theory of relativity is wrong. That would be interesting. It probably, I mean, it's 99% unlikely that we'll say that. But look, it is an experiment. It is a test. Could go the other way. Imagine if we have an entire century in which, we were sold a bill of goods about the theory of relativity. Pretty funny.
Well, yeah. The issue is relativity doesn't comport with quantum theory,
right?
When you get to certain aspects. But anyway, so people would say, yeah, of course it doesn't work. Anyway,
so here we are. We'll be back tomorrow for Abe, Matt, and Christine. I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.